only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 76 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. This week, I want to talk about some questions that sit at the intersection of the unexplained, the unspoken, and also the unaccepted. I want to talk about one of the most provocative ideas in the entire field of anomalous research. I want to talk about one of the growing ideas that's supported by testimony from former intelligence officers, defense insiders, contractors, researchers, and even spiritual people within world religions, that entities that we're seeing and are being talked about by whistleblowers that are associated with UFO or UAP phenomena might not be extraterrestrial at all. They may not be aliens, they may not be outsiders, but humans. Maybe humans from another dimension, humans perhaps from another evolutionary path, or even humans from our own future. It's a theory that has gained tremendous traction, not just because it's sensational, but because it accounts for patterns that the extraterrestrial hypothesis does struggle to explain. Last night I saw an interview with Elon Musk, and he's always being asked about aliens because I think people figure since he sends so much into space, he must be cued in to what's going on by the American government at the very least. And other talk show hosts like Joe Rogan have mentioned that he knows that Elon Musk is holding back on what he knows about extraterrestrials or interdimensions. And it's very interesting that Elon Musk, when he's asked directly the question, are there extraterrestrials, he'll always use the word, there are no aliens out there. He always says that, as if he's stupid, because someone of his intelligence and his knowledge wouldn't use the word aliens. Nobody uses the word aliens anymore. People talk about non-human entities. They talk about extraterrestrials. They talk about biologicals. They talk even about craft and people or beings, I suppose, that may be from AI, some form of mixture of machine and entities that are human. So I want to today examine some of these claims. I want to look at who's saying them, and I want to analyze what this means for religion, consciousness, and of course life after death, which is the whole purpose of this podcast. I want to consider whether the entities that have been long assumed to be non-human may be far close to us than we ever expected. In the last decade, something has definitely changed. People with experience in intelligence, aerospace, and military operations, people who are trained to be precise and careful with their language, have been publicly suggesting that the phenomenon behind the UAP encounters may originate from here, not from distant star systems. And I don't think this shift happened randomly. It certainly started emerging from patterns that people were seeing in the data. When they looked at the behavior of UAPs, they noticed how they could suddenly appear or suddenly disappear, and they had an apparent ability to manipulate space-time that they had also been seen throughout human recorded history. And they are very similar in the way that they interact with us to consciousness. It's been thought, as I've said many times before, that they can be communicated with through telepathy. So the extraterrestrial model does explain some aspects, but not everything. And so when people started looking at this very seriously in the last few years because of all the whistleblowers who are coming forward with the disclosure movement, the insiders began presenting a slightly different possibility, that these entities may in fact be human, and not from a faraway reality, but from a very familiar reality. For those of you who've not been following this podcast in tremendous detail, I really must bring you up to date on some of the multi-origin theories and some of the people who are putting these forward, so the rest of the podcast can be put into the proper context. The most influential one, I think, is a man called David Grusch, and he's an intelligence whistleblower who has testified before Congress, and he claimed that very high-level officials in the United States government have recovered craft and biological material associated with what's been called UAPs. He actually used the phrase non-human biologics. Now, what really matters, as I mentioned with Elon Musk, is what he did not say. He never said these were aliens. He never insisted that they were extraterrestrials. Instead, Grusch stated that multiple sources inside the classified programs told him that intelligences involved may be interdimensional, ultradimensional, which I presume is something way beyond the dimensions that we're normally seeing on Earth, part of another reality operating alongside ours, or from a different timeline from ours. And in internal discussions, according to him, various analysts have debated what these entities might be. Grusch has refused to narrow it down, even in more recent interviews. He has again suggested that these entities may be partly biological, may be partly machine, and that they may be from Earth originally in some way. But people who are refusing to commit on one interpretation, and he certainly is as well. So the phenomenon itself is really resisting a simple classification, but the message is really clear, that we're not necessarily dealing with beings from another planet. We're probably dealing with beings that are related to us. Next is Louis Elizondo. He's the former director of the Pentagon's AATIP program, which was a task force that was set up by Congress to look into the truth of UAPs, and so far it does appear that they're not getting to the truth, and perhaps are not even wanting to look at the real truth. But Elizondo has been extremely careful with his language over the years. He's never made any great sensational claims. He speaks like someone who understands that every sentence has to be scrutinized. Yet he's reportedly dropped hints that the phenomenon is not extraterrestrial in conventional sense. One of his most often quoted statements is that the intelligence behind UAPs are co-located with us. They're not visitors, they're not travelers from stars, but intelligences that exist here, alongside us in some manner we don't yet have the science to describe. This does sound now increasingly like angels and demons and the religious idea of some mystical force out there that is good and some force that is evil. The thing that Tucker Carlson and many very progressive right-wing Christians in the United States are talking about all the time. He stated that calling these entities extraterrestrial is probably inaccurate because their behavior suggests they may operate from a reality that's intertwined with ours. Elizondo really avoids discussing biology, and he avoids any claims of abductions, and he also avoids speculation, but he consistently implies that the phenomenon is somehow native to our environment, just not to our dimension of experience. This perspective, I think, supports the idea that these entities may be human-like in origin and composition. A CIA officer called John Ramirez has been even more explicit, and he stated that in certain intelligence circles, there have been serious discussions about the possibility that the entities associated with UAPs could be an ancient human species, or a parallel branch of human evolution, or a civilization that developed beyond our awareness, or even humans who diverged long before mainstream history began. He's described the idea that some of these beings may have separated from our lineage somehow and evolved in isolation or in hidden environments and developed technologies far beyond ours. We've covered that before in talking about Lacerta and also last week. Now, to be clear, Ramirez is not claiming that this is fact. He's just saying it was seriously considered within intelligence analysis. And I think what matters is that the idea of human-related intelligences is not a fringe theory inside these communities. It's one of several working hypotheses that very serious, very highly paid and very powerful people are talking about seriously. Many people are familiar with Jacques Vallée. He's one of the most influential thinkers in UFO research and was made famous in Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, playing the character of Lacombe. And he's long argued that the extraterrestrial model doesn't fit the evidence. He proposes that the entities behind UAPs are ultraterrestrial, meaning they originate, I think, from a dimension or a layer of reality that coexists with ours. In his view, these beings may have interacted with humanity throughout recorded history and appearing in many different forms depending on human culture, such as angels, shining beings, or fairies, or messengers, or apparitions, or visitors, or maybe even guides when you're channeling. For the purposes of this podcast, I think what is particularly interesting is that it also may include what we consider to be spirits coming through to talk to mediums, or the ghosts that people see, or the ideas that people are getting messages from other realities through pendulums or Ouija boards or anything else for that matter. Whatever these entities were that were communicating have obviously been interpreted by religions throughout history and mean different things to different religions and different faiths. But Jacques Vallée, he was very interested that these beings appear to have some access to dimensions and properties of reality that we do not understand, which could explain their instant appearances and their disappearances. And his hypotheses align with the idea that these entities may be human-like or humanoid, but operating on a different plane of existence. A man called Eric Davis who's a physicist and a defense contractor with experience of writing official reports for the Pentagon, has spoken about the possibility that UAP-related intelligences may be transdimensional. He suggested that the phenomenon could involve form of intelligence that are biologically similar to humans, could be culturally divergent from humans, or they could have been originating from an alternate version of human evolution. But he's very careful with the details. David's statements point toward a phenomenon that doesn't really fit neatly into extraterrestrial categories. But his framing supports the idea of a connection between the phenomenon and human biology and human development. Then there's the future human hypothesis, and this is a very intriguing interpretation, and it comes from the anthropologist Dr. Michael P. Masters, who argues that the classic image of the grey alien resembles an evolved version of humanity. Why? Because they have this large cranium skull. They have these very large eyes. They have a smaller mouth. They're reduced musculature. They're advanced technology. And possibly they have mastery of time manipulation. And Masters has suggested that UAP craft may operate not through interstellar travel, but through time. Now, if true, these entities wouldn't be extraterrestrials. They would be our descendants. The theory is compelling because it explains why these beings are so interested in us now and why they appear humanoid, and why they apparently, if you believe some of these stories, they seem to be interested in studying human genetics, and why they appear repeatedly through human history. It also neatly bypasses the massive physics challenges of interstellar travel. If the phenomenon is human, just not human from our point in time, it changes everything. So why are so many insiders open to a human-related or a dimensional explanation? I think it's because the data points towards the behaviors that don't align with extraterrestrial visitors. For instance, they have instantaneous acceleration, they have silent flight, they seem to have entry and exit from our reality. We don't seem to be able to observe any form of propulsion. There is telepathic communication. There is definitely interaction with human consciousness, and that it's been a recurring presence throughout history. I think a civilization from another star system would likely behave completely differently. But a civilization related to us, or an intelligence that does coexist with us in another dimension, would perhaps fit these observed patterns more closely. But this brings me to a very profound question, that if these entities are human or human-related, what does that mean for religion and our whole understanding of spirituality? Because for thousands of years, humans have reported encounters with beings of light, messengers, and figures with knowledge beyond human capability. And these descriptions including being able to fly, they have this ability to go up and down, they have a radiant glow, they can communicate without speech, they often appear in dreams or in visions, or even with DMT trances. They often give warnings or teachings, and they suddenly disappear. Of course, ancient people interpreted these encounters through the lens of their own spirituality. But if a human-related intelligence has been interacting with us for millennia, then many religious experiences may represent interpretations of these interactions. But this doesn't invalidate religion. I think it just reframes it. It suggests that spiritual texts may contain accounts of real encounters, as we mentioned with the Book of Enoch. It may be understood symbolically, though, rather than technologically. The angels of one era may be the visitors of another, but the message remains the same, even if the framework changes. And now the interesting thing for me is, how does this relate to life after death and dimensional transition? Many near-death experiences have been describing the sensation of leaving the body, or observing events from above, or entering another realm, meeting deceased relatives, encountering beings of light, or experiencing unconditional acceptance, or returning to their bodies when they're told it's not your time. These descriptions come from people of all backgrounds, beliefs, and cultures. And if dimensions or layers of reality exist, and if certain entities move through them, then consciousness may do the same. And I think if you accept this interpretation, you realize that death is not the annihilation of everything. Consciousness definitely continues, and all the afterlife is just a dimensional shift. And mediumship, or what I'm doing, is communication across dimensions. And ghosts are beings that are operating in a neighboring reality. And the dead are alive, just in a different layer of existence. And this aligns with theories that UAP-related intelligence interact with consciousness directly. If these entities are human-related, and if they understand dimensional reality, then they may have insights or abilities that relate directly to what we call the afterlife. And this, I think, would unify religion, spiritual encounters, after-death experiences, UFO, UAP sightings, and all sorts of paranormal events. And it would join it into one single framework, that humans and human-connected beings existing across multiple dimensions and timelines are able to communicate. So where does all of this leave us? Well, we have testimony, not proof, that beings connected to UAP phenomena may be humans from another dimension, or humans from another evolutionary branch, or humans from a parallel timeline, or humans from our own future. This might explain the humanoid appearance and their interest in our biology, the long-term presence throughout our history, their ability to manipulate reality, and the interactions with consciousness, the similarity with religious encounters, and the overlap with the after-death phenomenon. Now, as you know, nothing happens in this podcast unless I have a feeling that something wants to come through me. It's either an entity or it's a feeling that I need to do some research and then try to explain to you all listening. And this week again has been no different. Obviously, this talk about entities that may be interdimensional or maybe human has got me thinking about something that really grabbed my attention when I was reading my iPad in bed last week, just shortly after doing last week's podcast. And I suddenly came across this very long dissertation from a group of non-physical entities that claim to be interdimensional beings that are called the Arcturians. Now, you can look that up. It's nothing new. The Arcturians are all over the internet. But I thought I would talk about that because for some reason, I feel very moved to bring them into this discussion as perhaps an example of an interdimensional being that may be non-alien in that respect. They may be in some way related to humanity, or at the very least, they've been around way longer than humanity has been on this earth. Now, there is also a lot of talk that I've been reading about and hearing about this week about what happened in the Great Pyramid of Giza. So I quickly want to talk about that before we talk about the Arcturians. Because understanding all of this means that you guys need to suspend your belief, your disbelief, I should say, about the origins of humanity, and that potentially there have been civilizations on Earth way before us anyway. And maybe that's what's being discussed in high circles and very difficult for people to accept, that we're not number one, that we've not always been just the most dominant intelligent species on the planet, that maybe we've been discovering, and maybe certain elements of the government know, that there have been ancient civilizations way beyond the human species, millions of years perhaps before we even walked on this planet. And they may well have evidence of this and have also suppressed that knowledge. The Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is probably one of the most iconic monuments on the planet. It's one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, and people say it was built 4,500 years ago. And that's according to the mainstream archaeological timeline. But in recent years, there's been so much debate that the Great Pyramid could be far older than we think. And there could be something lying beneath it, which is perhaps evidence of a civilization that's lost in time. And I think, although it's been apparently accepted that it was built during the reign of Pharaoh, I think his name was Khufu, around 2500 BCE, this dating is supported by quarry marks that were found on rocks last century by adventurers. And these quarry marks were found also on papyrus records of workers transporting the limestone and other old stuff to build the pyramid. Allegedly, when people have seen these quarry marks in the 19th century, they've copied them, and they've measured them, and they've tried to go through nearly every accessible chamber. In the 19th century, they even blasted with dynamite inside the Great Pyramid and discovered, I think, 5 or 6 new chambers. And allegedly in those chambers were these quarry marks, which would have shown, according to the historical timeline, that this was from the builders of the pyramids at around 2500 BCE. And that's been the historical understanding ever since. There was an individual who claimed all the glory for this discovery, and some people are very legitimately calling this into doubt, that he may have in fact counterfeited these quarry marks inside the pyramid from marks that he found on blocks outside the pyramid, in order to perhaps justify that he'd made this huge discovery that really dated the pyramid exactly. But none of this is very convenient, because Egyptologists and scientists right now are finding still the engineering of the Great Pyramid to be something that is perhaps technologically way advanced of a society that was using hand tools in 2,500 years before the birth of Christ. They can see that the Great Pyramid was once sheathed in polished white limestone, and it was cut with such precision, and the blocks fit so incredibly tightly that a piece of paper can barely slide between them. And the structure is aligned absolutely to true north with astonishing accuracy, within a fraction of a degree. And there's this, of course, mystery of its purpose. And it's been called all my life Khufu's tomb, and yet no mummy has ever been found. There were no definite burial artifacts, no clear hieroglyphic inscriptions were discovered inside, and the chambers seem very empty, as if the pyramid's purpose was something much more than a place for burial. And then in 2017, there was a project called Scan Pyramids that used particular tomography, a scanning technique similar to X-rays, to peer inside the structure. And they discovered, allegedly, previously unknown large cavities, and one particular large cavity above what's called the Grand Gallery. It's still unexplored, and no one knows why it's there. And some archaeologists like to stand by the 2500 BCE timeline, but the pyramid remains very enigmatic, and it's prompted a lot of researchers, academic and independent, to ask, what if the story began long before that? There is a hypothesis that something is lying beneath the Great Pyramid, perhaps an ancient city or a chamber complex, or even traces of a civilization that's been lost to history. There are definitely, we know, subterranean chambers under the Great Pyramid. Archaeologists have mapped these deep, unfinished caverns beneath the bedrock. It seems to be some part of the construction plan, but nobody really knows what it is. And additionally, at Giza, they have found extensive tunnels and catacombs and shaft networks, some newly discovered, some dating to periods far later than the period's construction. But these could be just natural limestone cavities or ancient quarry tunnels. Nobody's terribly sure. So with that knowledge, and perhaps accepting that it could well be possible that there was an ancient civilization way before humanity was even around, and our history has either got it wrong or it's been covered up, could we then look at the possibility that one of the ancient civilizations was called the Arcturians? Some people have talked about Atlanteans. These are civilizations that apparently were wiped away. But the Arcturians have been described as guardians or healers, and the architects of consciousness, and guides who have watched over humanity for thousands and some say millions of years. But who are they really? Where does this mythology come from? They supposedly communicate through channelers, and they also come to people in near-death experiences. I think the Arcturian messages often refer to something which are called densities. These are levels of consciousness and evolution. But first of all, we need to talk about the Arcturians and where all these stories come from. Now, Arcturus itself is a real star. It's an orange giant and one of the brightest in the night sky. It's located about 36 to 37 light years from Earth. And it's true that ancient civilizations admired it. The Greeks believed Arcturus was the guardian of the bear, guiding stars around the North Pole. And it's been recorded in Native American documents. It was considered to be a star which was showing a transition between earth and spiritual movement. Some people even believed that souls passed near Arcturus on their journey between worlds. But the modern idea of Arcturians as a civilization of advanced benevolent beings began appearing in the 20th century. Edgar Cayce wrote The Sleeping Prophet, and he spoke of Arcturus as a realm of very high spiritual development. And he described it as a gateway for souls between incarnations, a center of advanced healing and a home for enlightened consciousness. But he never used the word Arcturians, but that certainly started people thinking. In the 1980s, when channeling really started to blossom, particularly in the 1970s and the 1980s, people began reporting telepathic messages from beings claiming to be fifth dimensional, or non-physical or semi-physical, highly evolved, or deeply compassionate towards humanity. And these sources described Arcturians as guardians of the galaxy, and keepers of the peace, and teachers of consciousness. Now, in this modern world, people talk about Arcturians as being near-death experience things, or something that people see as astral projection, or they see it in regression hypnosis, or they receive psychic messages, dreams, or they get channeled messages in the same way as I channel messages from Titan and others. Now, this may be literal or symbolic, but it's become a very core part of metaphysical thought. They are said to look reasonably similar to humans, but they are tall and slender with a different color. They seem to be sort of light blue or violet. They have these large almond-shaped eyes. They have long fingers. And they are portrayed usually as physically beautiful by human standards, with very elegant, refined looks about them. They are very high density, as they are called. They're pure light forms, or they can change their shapes, or they can be like plasma, or they can be waves of consciousness rather than individuals. And they also sometimes come across as collective minds rather than isolated personalities. Some say that the Arcturians choose the forms that they want to appear as in order to make the viewer comfortable. So the appearance may be symbolic, not literal. Arcturians apparently radiate unconditional love and a profound sense of safety. And people who've come across Arcturians describe tremendous feelings of peace, compassion, sense of guidance, of ancient wisdom, and a presence that somehow feels familiar, as if you're meeting someone you knew long before this lifetime. These Arcturian entities almost never have been described as physically interacting with humans. Instead, communication is said to occur through non-ordinary means, such as telepathy. And people who are channeling say these thoughts enter the mind like a warm breeze, and words are accompanied by emotion rather than sound. and there's a simultaneous sense of understanding. People see them in their dreams, or they get these sudden bursts of energy download, sudden insights, these ideas that you've suddenly got an idea in your mind. It's a realization and understanding that's come through fully formed. Other people get just emotional impressions. And they feel this sense of intuition. They have a sense of knowing that comes with no reason. Some channels have described seeing geometric patterns or grids or spirals or fractal-like images, almost like people who've taken DMT or psilocybin in high doses can interpret the sort of realms that they say that they are seeing. Some people feel that there is a collective voice, that they communicate as one and they speak as we, not as I. And they describe themselves as a sort of unified consciousness. And their messages often come with an emotional signature, like a frequency. But to really understand Arcturian communication, we need to understand this concept of densities. And this is one of the core frameworks used by people who teach Arcturian stuff. This is called the law of one material. And many metaphysical systems have been used to describe the evolution of consciousness. But the law of one describes it as grades of densities, a bit like levels in a school. These are layers of awareness. They're not physical places, they're vibrational states. For instance, the first density is the awareness of being. These are elements, materials that are like minerals or the foundational blocks of matter. The first density is the realm of earth and water and fire and air. And here consciousness is really, really simple. Then there's a second density, and this is plants, animals, bacteria, life that grows but is not fully self-aware. And Arcturian teaching says that humanity often assists second density beings in their transition to greater awareness through relationships, for instance, our pets. Then there's the third density, self-awareness and choice, and this is where humanity currently resides. This density is defined by a sense of ego, free will, morality, the choice between service to self or service to others. And this density is difficult. It creates friction. It forces us to grow. And Arcturians say that Earth is one of the most intense third density planets because we experience this forgetfulness as to our true nature. We have emotional extremes, we have social conflict, we have a real density here of learning who we really are. Then there's the fourth density. This is what Arcturians say humanity is moving towards. And our fourth density characteristics include telepathy, emotional transparency, community over competition, healing of trauma, social harmony, recognition of unity. In the fourth density, individuality still exists, but with a stronger awareness of interconnectedness. It's very much like the RIA document from last week. Earth is said to be transitioning into this state, causing a tremendous upheaval and all the rapid change that we're witnessing now and the moving towards disclosure. The fifth density is described as being a place of wisdom and light. The realm includes high intellect, a non-physical form, a deep understanding of energy, the ability to manipulate matter, a sudden memory of all our past lives, and very advanced spiritual technology. This fifth density appears as light or energy or thought forms. Then there's a sixth density. Now, this is a density that has compassion and intelligence together, and it includes a collective consciousness, a sort of harmonization of cosmic laws. It's the ability to inhabit multiple forms simultaneously, the ability to be part of the co-creation of things. Many describe Arcturians as existing partly in sixth density as well, meaning that they are multidimensional. The seventh density, this is a very advanced density, and beings in this density rarely take a form, and they serve as guides for entire star systems. And they're at the end, if you like, of their evolutionary cycle. But they also apparently hold the blueprint, if you like, for creation itself. Then right at the end is called the eighth density, and people call this the God Source return. It's often described as a unity with the Creator. This is where we dissolve into pure consciousness. This is the end and the beginning of all cycles. Arcturians describe the eighth density as the cosmic womb, or the central sun of consciousness. But this density system is the key to understanding the Arcturian messages. They see Earth not as a broken or chaotic or failing planet, but as a planet as in the middle of a graduation process. And like any other graduation, it's a bit messy. One of the key messages that Arcturians give to people through channeling is that humans are not just bodies, but multidimensional souls. It's communicated to us that we are eternal, that we've lived many lives, that we are connected to multiple star lineages across time and space, but we chose to incarnate on Earth, and that we came here with a distinct purpose. Their intention apparently is not to dominate us, but to somehow wake us up. They want humanity to change. They want us to heal and to unite and to discover purpose, raise our consciousness, and move beyond fear. And if we can do all of that, they describe Earth, which is a young civilization on the brink of awakening. If we do all of that, and we stop internal conflict, and we heal the environment, and we mature emotionally, and we developed this unity together with consciousness, we will then be ready for membership, if you like, in some form of galactic community. They're also interested in preventing us from destroying the planet, which I'm sure we all are. But they feel that we have free will, so they mustn't interfere, but they can just guide us so we can prevent some form of catastrophic collapse. They say that they also want to help personally souls, and enable to help people to get a connection to their higher power. Now, lastly, I just want to talk about something that I intend to do next week. How can we communicate with the Arcturians? Well, I believe that if all of this is true, it must be possible for me to be able to also channel the Arcturians. So how do I do it? I believe it's going to be quite different from the way that I've been channeling entities up till now. According to the sources who do it, channelers, mystics and meditators and contact experiences, the Arcturians don't communicate through physical means. They don't, for instance, come knocking on the door. And they don't use language in a way that we do. Their communication is very much telepathic, emotional, vibrational. And this means that I'm going to have to get myself into a very high density state. And this, as we described earlier, is going to be sort of the fifth density and above. And this means that I've got to somehow raise my baseline vibration towards that density. I haven't done that consciously before. So I've got to get myself into the right emotional state. you've got to get yourself into a feeling of stillness, openness, curiosity, and gratitude. That's apparently key. Quite often, meditation helps. It's like an invitational state. You have to invite them. And a common method to get to in an invitational state is to sit comfortably, slow your breathing, visualize light, which is usually blue or violet, gathering around you. To have that invitation, such as, I welcome communication only from beings of love, wisdom, and good intention. I've read that somewhere. And then you have to sort of let go. You can't reach for it. Don't hunt for the experience. You just have to allow it to come through. It's not like summoning. It's just kind of like switching on a beacon and waiting for the communication to come to you, because they're feeling that, yep, you're there ready to receive it. So with all of that, I really hope that I can adjust my energy signature in a way that can attract the Arcturians to come to me. And then most definitely I want to see for myself some truths and some feelings. So yes, communication with the Arcturians is possible, according to countless people, but it's not about something that you're summoning from outside. It's about turning your mind and your heart into higher frequency, one where their guidance becomes easier to perceive. So finally, although there is absolutely no archaeological evidence or any anthropological evidence or genetic evidence that there's been any human-like civilization on Earth older than Homo sapiens or other known hominin species, such as Neanderthals, there is that feeling amongst the fringe theories, if you like, and people who are studying spiritual stuff, or people who are interested in, like me, the UAP phenomenon, that there is more to this, that perhaps it's another cover-up, perhaps we're not being told the truth. I believe that if there's a possibility that there is never smoke without fire. So something is happening there. And it's very interesting that at the moment, the disclosure movement is encompassing the thought that there are these trans-mediums beings, there are these interdimensional beings, and that there are perhaps interdimensional groups such as the Arcturians that may be trying to make contact. I suppose it's a bit of a race for time. If disclosure, as a result of all the discussion, the documentaries and everything else, is getting closer, if it's true that potentially the United States might reveal what it knows and that Donald Trump might be the person to do it, is it going to be that there is technology that they have, or that they have recovered non-human or human biologics that don't relate to humans that we know now? Could it be that there has been communication through psychic means with non-human intelligence or human intelligence? Could it be that perhaps a lot of the research that we've been doing, such as quantum research or particle research and building of huge hadron colliders, all of this, could it be a bit of a front for the fact that we've actually been trying to communicate across quantum fields, across dimensions? Could it be that this is going to start being revealed to us? Thank you very much.